This is the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia, the podcast for passionate butchers.
G'day butchers, thanks for tuning in to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast. I'm your host Doug Piper. Before we catch up with this week's guest, I'm just going to remind you one more time to get your orders in for the next Greatest Butcher on Your Block promotion. The order date has passed by, but we do have a few extra kits for any late orders. The promotion starts on the 28th of February and we will be doing a lot of social events all around Australia to promote you, the local independent butcher. So you must get registered to be involved. Just email me your shop details at butchers@mla.com.au and we'll send you out a free kit later in the month. This independent retail butcher promotion is free to all butchers to join and is proudly supported by MLA and the Beef and Lamb Producers of Australia. Today, more than ever, shoppers want to know more about what they're eating, where the meat comes from, and that the animal has had a great life. Are some of your customers asking some curly questions about farming practices or the meat industry, or want to know more about the provenance of the products you sell? Or are you looking for a different edge or offer over your competition? Well, stay tuned as Feather and Bone Providore owner Grant Hilliard explains how he built his niche business and became renowned for supplying ethically and sustainably grown pasture-fed meat. Grant Hilliard, aka Mr. Bone, and partner Laura Dalrymple, aka Mrs. Feather, they have been busy running Feather and Bone Providore for the last 15 years. Their days are no different to most butchers, early starts, late finishes, but they have to find the time to physically visit their suppliers, so the farmers that supply them with beef and lamb, sourcing pasture-raised livestock directly from farms committed to genuinely sustainable soil, plant and animal health practices, and looking at opportunities, different breeds they can offer. The animals Grant sources live all or the majority of their lives outside, ranging freely on sustainably managed pastures. G'day Grant and welcome mate.
G'day Doug, how are you?
Going very well mate, how about yourself?
Well, it's been a long, hot summer's day, so just walked in the door, so it's been a long day as well. So
yeah,
I'm pleased to be sitting down and having a chat with you.
Yeah, great, mate. Yes, it's been one of those warm ones, and I'm on the Central Coast, and we've just been absolutely hammered by a great big storm. But it's gone as fast as it came, so that's a good thing, mate. We needed a bit of water around here again.
Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get some rain out of it.
Yeah,
too.
hopefully, mate. Yeah, so thanks for joining us tonight, mate. The Butchers Guild has been, this is our 11th episode, so I thought it was about time to change it up a little bit and give the butchers something a little bit different to listen to, and somebody's insights that are a little bit different as well to what the normal butcher is. So, mate, how did you get involved in butchery to start with?
Accidentally, and so probably not the usual way that most people become butchers. I was actually working in restaurants and sourcing wine for restaurants and a few other things, garlic and oil and things like that. And I became very interested in the restaurant we worked in anyway. We bought a lot of, or that I worked in, we bought a lot of whole small animals and we got lamb and we got everything else, but the lamb especially interested me because it was never differentiated by breed. And I was curious about that because I knew that there was in the world, there's probably 300 or 400 recognized breeds of sheep. But in Australia anyway, most of it is merino derived. But I was curious about some of the other breeds that were specifically bred for meat. And I heard a program on radio and it was about Southdown lamb. And it had been the backbone of certainly Victorian prime lamb production through the sort of 60s and 70s, and old timers down there certainly remember it well. But they'd sort of stopped breeding in the 70s. A lot of those lamb farms had moved over to dairy when they were considered a bit too fat, the Southdown, and so a lot of people moved away from them. But I was curious to try them, so I set about finding 3 Southdown lambs, one for the restaurant I worked in and one each for another 2 restaurants that I knew who were interested, and after about 6 months, literally, I found one breeder who was prepared to sell me 3 of them, and that was really the start of it. But I was thinking I was just going to sell whole lambs to restaurants, so I wasn't certainly going to be a butcher. I was just I was a sourcer or a providore.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. And from there, actually going back a step, yes,
Yeah.
so many different breeds of lamb. Like as you mentioned, the merino. I think the meat industry was actually born out of the merino lamb. Meat was like that little lamb meat was
Byproduct of the wool industry, really. Yeah.
yeah, yes, which was very interesting to hear. And look where it is today. It's it's one of the more premium, I suppose, cuts of meat that we can eat, especially with the prices at the moment that we're currently paying for lambs and what the producers are getting for them. But there's a lot of work that goes into it too, as you're well aware, like with specific breeds. And I know there's a guy down there in Victoria, Tom Bull, I think his name is. He's doing a Hampshire Downs lamb at the moment, and they're one of the bigger breeds of lambs. And I've yet to actually get my hands on one. A mate of mine, Darren O'Rourke, as we spoke to earlier from Vix, he's been playing around with them a bit, and they look absolutely fantastic. It's
Yeah, they are. They're late, like a black Suffolk. They're late maturing sheep, and they eat a lot. And so that's sort of, there's reasons why, like a black Suffolk your stocking density on one paddock for a black Suffolk versus other breeds, is much lower because they're much hungrier animals for what they yield, but the meat quality is very high. I think South Downs particularly, they're sort of the parents of most of the Southern English sheep that we know are bred from South Downs. Black Suffolk are certainly bred from South Downs. Very fine texture, but they were quite short-legged and carried a fair bit of fat, as I said. So that's why they fell out of favour. Although I think you'll find that most of the New Zealand flock still has a lot of South Down bloodlines in it, different to Australia, but in their prime lamb flock anyway.
right, yeah. I remember many years ago I was buying my lambs through PD Mulligan's, one of they're from now Carroll Lambs operating out of the abattoirs there, and Mulligan's used to have a little stamp on their envelopes, and it was Dorset lambs, and they were always the same. They were very good quality, and that whole region out there around Cowra was a great breeding ground for the sheep industry in New South Wales. And when PD Mulligan's, I'm not sure what happened to them when they closed. It was probably a no-brainer for, I think it's Chris Cummins, to take over that, to go into there and to use those same, build his business genetics, using that same genetics. Yeah, so it was a very smart move on his behalf, and I know that they sell a lot of lambs into the New South Wales market.
Yeah, well, most of what comes out of Cowra or breakout meats is Dorset based, the lamb that they source. And a lot of it from bloodlines up around Oberon. So
yeah, right. So Feather and Bone, how long's Feather and Bone been going for? 15 years?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, going on 16. So, but initially it was a very small concern. I sort of started it while I was still working in restaurants, and it was a sideline, and then it just sort of grew, and I found a place that agreed to let me hang a couple of lambs in his cool room, really. And I just sort of turned up with them. He was I wouldn't say yes to that, but he did, and very kindly, and gave me some space to work out of. And that's when I suppose it started to become, more of a conventional butchery operation, in that we were breaking lambs, and also I was starting to source beef and pork and chicken and other things as well. But it was still mostly lamb at the beginning.
Okay, and you're known as you're well renowned as a sustainable butchery, or aren't you? You've got a really great ethic there for the animals themselves. So what brought you into all that sort of line? What made you start?
Well, I think it was from visiting vineyards and sourcing wine, really. Vineyards, because they're generally smaller than most conventional livestock farms. You can see the borders of them very easily, and you can also see the differences between one vineyard and the next more easily. And there are vineyards there was not a single thing growing in the vineyard except the vine. But then I was looking at vineyards where they encouraged a lot of different sort of plants to grow there, and a very diverse sort of understory around the vines, and bringing in lots of different insects as a result of that. And that sort of diversity started to interest me very much in terms of the wines that they were making. And so I was interested in, how they were produced as much as what they were. So I wasn't really setting out, I suppose, to look for so-called quality meat. I was really looking for meat that it had a certain set of qualities attached to it, which was the selection of the genetics, the way it was grown, the way it was hopefully the way it was managed and leading up to the kill, and then what we did with it when we hung it. And it's because I didn't really focus on the what's interesting to me is that by not focusing on the eating quality, but focusing on all those other things, eating quality took care of itself, because the basic building blocks that gave you that good eating quality were already in place. Good management, good genetics, diverse pastures, and that's sort of what I'm looking for. Increasingly, I'm just really looking for farmers that farm in certain ways. I mean, in a farm's sort of ecosystem, what they sell, whether it be sheep or cattle or any other livestock or grain for that matter, it's actually a relatively small part of the biome that they look after. And by looking after the mass of that, they can then have a very high quality saleable product. And so I'm looking for farmers that focus on everything that lives on their farm, not just the thing that they sell to me.
So how do you find farmers like that?
Initially, it was very difficult. As I said, it took me 6 months to find a farmer that would sell me 3 Southdown. But once you sort of enter, and I sort of initially, I paid a little over the odds, I guess, but there was more work involved for them because the numbers were so small. So that seemed fair enough. And then, farmers who farm like that talk to each other, and they're often looking for outlets, because at the moment what happens is that they might take engage in a whole range of extra steps of land management and water management and animal management. But when they sell into the sales, none of that gets recognized. What will happen for a consumer who luckily stumbles across that is that they think that was a fantastic piece of lamb or beef or whatever it might be, but they won't be able to easily repeat the experience, because that direct line to the farm is not there mostly. So what I was very interested in, I suppose it comes from what I knew of wine, is that it's fairly commonplace with wine to sort of say it comes from this vineyard, it's grown from these grapes, it was picked at this alcohol. I mean, those sorts of qualities are what I was looking for in the meat, and what people started to really want and reacted well to. So I sort of quite quickly could see that people were as interested in those qualities in the meat that they were eating as they were in the wine that they were drinking, but they just weren't given the opportunity to really explore it 15 years ago in any sort of serious way.
Yeah, it's only in the recent few years, I suppose, where people have really become more interested in the provenance of the product and what sort of life did the animal have. There's been a lot of people over the years that were interested, but it's becoming more and more common now, and we get a lot of I suppose calls from butchers around Australia wanting more information about about provenance, about what is it, how do we go about proving this. So being able to, from your point of view, being able to say we're getting our sheep from farmer down in say Gippsland, and this is the breed. It's a real comforting thing for a lot of customers, and knowing that quality is going to be repeated time and time again.
Yes, So we at the start sort of said that we would only buy carcass meat, and also visit every farm that we sourced from. So that was the guarantee that we could give our customers, that we knew where it was grown, we knew who grew it, how it was grown. And being able to answer those things, I think, was fairly unusual, and also very reassuring for people. That gave them another window into what they were eating, and that to me was really crucial, being able to answer those questions. And if you couldn't answer the exact question at the time, I'd call the producer and say, someone wants to know sort of how many ewes you run, if I couldn't remember or didn't have my notes around me. Or how many different rams you're running with those. It might be quite a technical question about breeding or whatever. But if you can't answer those questions, we were very keen to be able to provide as much transparent information as possible. And we thought there was definitely a market for that. And I think the last 15 years have borne that out. That the demand for a much closer relationship to food has is definitely there, and it's because really that people have become so alienated. Without having to go at the supermarkets, that experience of buying meat in a supermarket on a tray, just out of a reach-in shelf with no one there to ask anything or tell you anything about it, is a very different experience to walking into a butcher and saying, I saw on your newsletter that you had those Hampshire Down lambs coming in. What are they like? Can I try that? And a lot of our customers, our regular customers, that's exactly what they do. They'll read the newsletter and say, "Oh, that's fantastic! I really have wanted to try Hampshire Down for ages. Can I? We'll hold it for 2 weeks and then." They'll try, roasted leg or whatever it might be. So the other thing is that we age meat quite a lot as well.
Yeah, I love the way that the customers are becoming more curious about meat, and they're forcing a lot of butchers to actually go out there and find out a little bit more about it. Like we all know how to break it down. We know the different cuts, and that's beef, that's lamb, that's chicken, that's pork, blah blah blah. But being able to give the customer that little bit of extra value add, like knowing that Doug's meat comes from Mudgee. That was what my customers used to say. I used to deal with a guy out of Mudgee many years ago, and all my beef came out of Mudgee, and that's what my customers knew. I didn't really know I didn't know the farmer. It used to come through this wholesaler, but that's where all this beef came from, and that gave me that point of difference. And it's a bit like, what you're doing is exactly the same thing. It's being able to actually add on to that story with being able to get so much more information out of the actual farmer.
Yeah, and look, a good farmer is an incredibly thoughtful, responsive practitioner, and it's our job to reflect that. And we deal with farmers who are seventh generation farmers. We deal with farmers who have led a life of, they've been a TV executive and then become a farmer and later in life, because they used to spend all their childhood at their uncle's place and have really had a deep love for it, but have always done other things. People are drawn to it for different reasons, but what is common to the farmers that we work with is a really, sort of intense interest in managing their properties better and certainly managing the conditions that the animals exist in. They're just one part of a very complex series of interactions, and I think that sort of is the difference. The farmers that we're looking for rarely keep their animals in one paddock for any length of time. They're moving them frequently. That allows the recovery of those pastures and as quickly as possible. Depending on the season, during the big dry, it was very difficult to manage it. But what the key thing was, they didn't let their soils go bare during that time.
Yeah, we often say when we're at events, it's all good to have great quality beef and lamb coming off your property, and these are great farmers for growing all this cattle and sheep. But to start with, they've got to be a grass farmer. That they've got to have the food there to start with. So being able to regenerate their paddocks, rotate their herds throughout their paddocks as well, that is the crucial part to it, because without food, the animals won't live.
Well, that's right, and if they do live, they just don't live to their fullest potential. So, what we're really interested in is how when you put the right genetics on the right pasture mix, and then manage it in a particular way, you get the best possible expression of what those genetics are capable of. And you could put the same genetics on a very differently managed property and not get half the result. The animal would still live okay, and to all intents and purposes would be quite healthy, but it wouldn't have the vitality that we're looking for, and that vitality is reflected in complexity of flavour. So and it's keeping quality and a whole range of things. There's a shine to that meat, and yourself when you get a carcass from an animal that's exceptionally healthy and exceptionally good quality. It's got a luster to it which is unmistakable.
Yeah, you're right. You often hear butchers, and I'm guilty of it too. You just look at the carcass as it's hanging there, and you go, "Wow, that's a beauty." You look at the conformation of around the rump, around the butt. That there's no shallowness across the backbone where the sirloin sits. And it's just the fat colour and the meat colour in particular. That's what we need. That's what all butchers look for, and that's what helps them make the sale because, as you know, the customers buy with their eyes. If it doesn't look good, they're not going to buy it.
Yeah, that's right. And there's only so many good cuts you can put at the front of the tray, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Too right. Mate, whole carcass utilisation is a big part of your business too. So the whole carcass is edible. You can get everything. You can make anything out of anything off the carcass. So, you know, that what do you find? How have you found that to be a bit of a challenge to be able to move a lot of these cuts? Or
initially, a huge challenge. I had no idea what I was really getting myself in for, and I was also buying, and still do buy. In case of beef, most of the steers I get are, if they're going to be close to 300 or often over. So they're big carcasses of beef, and there's a lot to get rid of there, or to sell. But now I suppose we're more established, so people come to us for all different things. I have people that only buy bones from me.
Yeah.
I have people that only buy eye fillet. Now, ideally, that's going to be 1.2% of the people that walk through through the front of the shop, and so I'm not disappointing anybody. And everybody who wants eye fillet gets it,
Yeah.
But equally, I've got a lot of people that just, they're looking for different parts. And I suppose it's something of the maturity of the business that we now have markets for, solid markets for each part of the carcass, no matter what animal we're dealing with. And I still have some lamb bones left over that I can't get rid of, which is, that's a bother to me that they go out as in the red bins, and I'd prefer to be able to sort of do something with that. We can turn them into broths, but it's a hard sell to do lamb broth. All our beef broth and chicken broth goes out the door straight away, so we never have any beef or veal bones left over. And fats, we either render if they're kidney fats, we'll render them down and jar them up, and also for for tallow as well. So we use as much as we can. I mean, I'd like to do more with leather, but the connection through the tanneries is not as easy as it could be. So it's extremely difficult to track the hides. We've done a few floor rugs from animals, but there's only one place that'll sort of do them in Ballarat, near Ballarat, that sort of does them in the way that we would like, and it's a very sort of it's a big process to go out, wrap it all in salt, then post it down there, and it comes back 3 months later.
It's it's an expensive exercise for a floor rug.
Well, it is, but they're spectacular when they come off a sort of a 3-year-old belted Galloway. They do look pretty magnificent. So, and they last a really, really long time. We've got I bought one home that was sort of, they hadn't done a very good job in taking it off and had a lot of holes in it, and I thought it was probably unsaleable, but it's been on our lounge room floor and survived 3 children and dogs and for about 15, 20 years, and it's still looking pretty good. So
pretty hardy animal.
I can vouch for the fact that they last a long time. Yeah. Well, those animals live up, they live on orange, and most of the year it's like 1 degree, and they love it.
Yeah,
they've got the double coat. So
yeah, they're such a beautiful animal. A mate of mine, his father was breeding them out at Marriwa. And he was selling them through his butcher shop too in Singleton, and he's got pictures of the animals, of the cattle standing in the paddocks all around his butcher shop, and if a kid would walk in there and put 2 and 2 together, I think they might go, oh crikey, I really don't want to eat that. That's such a beautiful little animal, that one. But they are magic looking animal, and the meat that you get off them, it's
excellent meat.
Oh God, it's beautiful beef.
It is, but it's it's late maturing. Like they really need to be a minimum of 2.5 before they start to really show their best, and that's not for everybody, obviously. But Galloway, straight Galloway, we used early on in colonial Australia as a non-specific beef breed, because they would eat things that a whole lot of other cattle just refuse to eat. They're very non-choosy in what they'll browse on. So they were put in paddocks that were considered unusable for other cattle breeds. So they had a real sort of function to rehabilitate. They used them to rehabilitate paddocks as well.
Yeah, right.
Because where they come from in Scotland, like that's not lush, green, super fertile ground a lot of the time. That's hard country and cold country, and they've developed perfectly to be able to handle that rough ground and still put on fat. And still make great meat out of it, but it just takes a longer time because the input isn't quite as high.
Yeah, I was driving. I live on the Central Coast, and
Yeah.
I was heading towards Avoca Beach probably about a couple of years ago. And you drive through a sort of a semi-rural area there, and I couldn't believe it. As we drove around the corner, there was all these belted Galloways sitting on the side of the road in a paddock. And
Oh, yes.
they too are a brilliant looking animal. They're like a zebra gone wrong. They just got one big white stripe through the centre of it. But
Yes, it was the Dutch belted cows were crossed with the Galloway in the 1700s or something, and
okay.
the belt is this genetic imprint. It'll go through 6 crosses and it still turns up. So it's solidified in the breed. Pure Galloway breeders look down, sort of look slightly sideways at belted Galloways, think they're just show ponies. But
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you do a bit of dry aging there in the shop as well, mate?
Yeah, we do. I mean, off a sort of a large carcass, we would go through that over a 6-week period. So we would start on the flank and shank and just basically work our way through it. So if it's all in balance, they're rotating. We've got beef coming in all the time, of course, but it's rotating through, and we're using different cuts at different stages. And, we sell, for instance, like topside, we sell a lot of that to restaurants. If it's been aged properly, 3 or 4 week aged topside will be better for steak tartare, way better than yearling eye fillet, for instance. Much more flavour and just as tender. And cheaper. So, there are benefits to get, restaurants sort of seek that out as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there for topside, especially when you're dry aging. I had a play with one late last year. I've got the umami bags, the dry age bags. I played with.
Oh, yes.
I put a whole fresh topside in one of those, and I think I aged it for around about 4 or 5 weeks, and it was just to be quite honest, you know what? It ate as good as a good sirloin, as a grill, and you wouldn't normally do that with topside. But when you mentioned tartare, I thought, you know what? Yeah, that would be absolutely perfect for it because you're getting that lovely flavour out of the dry aged meat.
And also you've got the tenderness there because you've aged it for a little while. It's the same with, say, when we get mutton in. I'll hang those for quite a long time, and very thinly sliced raw backstrap of, say, 6-week dry aged mutton is absolutely brilliant, and I can guarantee you no one will know what they're eating, but they'll all love it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we had something to do probably a couple of years ago in Melbourne, and I can't think of the guy's name, but we had some dry aged mutton there. It was very strong. I've got to admit, it was very strong. Maybe it wasn't cooked properly what we had, but we were eating parts off the whole carcass, and I think the forequarter was might have been a little bit too far gone, but I could certainly pick up the flavour. It was tender, I'll give it that much, but it was more so the flavour that was little bit on the gamey side, if anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends also on the breed, how sort of like strong the fat is, and that's why, if I was going to extend it for that, I would be looking at something as lean as the backstrap, where it's really just the muscle that you're working with rather than the fat. The fat, if it was a shoulder, I'd probably be looking at maybe 2 to 3 weeks would be ideal.
Yeah.
Hogget, maybe 10 days to 2 weeks is about perfect for hogget, I reckon. And but obviously it depends on what the demand is. We're trying to manage that all the time, and sometimes we get it absolutely right, and sometimes, I look at it and I think, well, we're turning this over too quickly, or we've got a lot of stuff here that's needs to move on. But that's sort of maturity of a business, I think, where you start to be better at predicting what you need. And you asked about sort of all the different cuts. What's interesting now is that we don't really have seasonal peaks and troughs for forequarter and hindquarter anymore. We have people buying forequarter all year round. And so it used to be quite hard for me to manage that sort of move back and forward on the body through the season. But now I don't see much change, season to season. which I used to before.
We've had a lot of influence from other markets around the world, I think, and it's really opened a lot of butchers' eyes up with what they can do. Like, we played around with the chuck a while back, and you get the Delmonico and Denver steaks out of it. Admittedly, they're not. To get the best result, it's got to be. I'm afraid it's got to be grain fed, where you're getting a lot more marbling through, and you can use the whole thing as a steak. You can grill a whole lot, but it really opened up a lot of butchers' eyes when we fed it up to them one night to say this was chuck. And no, it's not just a casserolling steak. You can grill it, and it does actually rate quite highly if you're using the right product. And other cuts, like a lot of the flanks and skirts, there's a lot of influence there from the European countries and Brazil and South America. They live on those things, and they know exactly how to cook them, don't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, we could sell way more flank and skirt and hanger than we can get, or than we get, on the carcasses that we buy. It's very popular, so it doesn't hang around at all. Well, a lot of people, I think, at TAFE, they'll probably say, this is what you should be mincing,
Yeah.
We sort of rarely put the flank or the skirt straight into mince, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about a lot of those cuts. We could focus a lot more on them, I think, as butchers, focus and educate customers about them and what they can do with them, because they are the money cuts, really. If you're only throwing them into mince, if you're going to sell it as a unique steak or a trending steak, you're going to get a heck of a lot better return for it.
Yeah, and also you've led your customer on a sort of a journey that they're rewarded as well. It's great flavour as long as they know how to cook it, and cook it really hard and fast, and don't overcook it.
Yeah.
But also you've got to prepare them for the idea that it's going to take a little more chew. But I sort of think tenderness is slightly overrated. I think, and probably in the MLA charts, tenderness used to be eight out of the total score, I think, wasn't it? When they did their out of 20s or out of 10s, was it the total beef rating scores they used to have about 20 years ago? Tenderness was a much higher percentage then than it is now, I think. Flavour has increased as it should, as in terms of the component breakdown of the evaluation of it, and I think that's, we're designed to chew. We've got, most of us have pretty good teeth and can actually do it. We don't need to sort of be able to crush it with the tongue against the roof of your mouth, So, which is why I don't, I'm not so fussed that I don't have a lot of fillet to sell.
Yeah. How do you manage that, though, when you've sold out of fillets? Because as we know, every animal only has two of them. How do you manage that? Do you have to? You obviously point the customer into something else.
Yeah, that's it. And sometimes I lose people.
Yeah.
And I've just sort of got to wear that. But it was sort of harder at the beginning because people would say, I'd like a sirloin. I'd say, well, look, I was a bit more hardliner probably then, and I would say, look, it's only 3 week aged. I don't start selling it till it's 4 to 6. And sorry, can I get you something else? And they'd say, no, I really want to sell it. I honestly, I can't remember the last time where I said to somebody, I haven't got any fillet to sell.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Which is great, I mean, I don't know why I think that's again, just the market maturing and also customers, sort of our business maturing, but also customers looking a bit further afield as well.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I thought, you've educated them enough to, move off a fillet, move off a Scotch fillet, move on to something different, like maybe your hanger steak. They're only very small too. So, but the flanks using other cuts, there's a lot of it in there in the carcass to use up. Yeah, and
and if you could be bothered, like getting the pave steaks out of the heel muscle, there's all sorts of things to cut, and I suppose our customers are happy to be led, and they've sort of they've come to us for. We're not easy to find. We're not on a high street. We're in an industrial estate, and our current shop is part of our sort of, like a factory production warehouse. So I suppose once they've come, they've made a decision already. It's maybe a little different to a lot of high street butchers where it might be just, oh, there's a butcher, I'm just going in and grab a steak for a barbecue. They've made a journey to find us. They certainly don't find us just walking down the road.
Yeah. I've been to your place once, and it was a bit of a mission to find it, but
but once you got there, hopefully, it's and we've sort of just slowly changed it over the years, and it was a ham curer's factory when we got it, and so we've sort of adapted it to what we need, and these days it sort of works pretty well for us. But we're looking to open another shop. So
yeah, you mentioned that. That's good. Growing finally, getting another, opening up another door, another chapter.
Well, yeah, we do home delivery, and as a lot of people have done, but we always had home delivery, but obviously COVID, placed a lot more value on those services, and so that's expanded. And but still, people, especially with what we sell, they like people to come in and we have a big window from the shop that looks into our cool room, so they can see all the carcasses hanging, and if they want to, they can walk through too. They put on a hat. I'm happy for them to go through. I want them to be engaged. For us, that means they will come back, because that engagement is what it's engaging with the ideas, and then their eyes and their stomach will follow.
Yeah. The you spoke about your home delivery. I was reading through your website today, the packaging that you're using there. That's very interesting.
Yeah, we've moved away from. We used to do recycled foam boxes that we got from a guy who sort of has the contract to take all the old boxes out of Flemington markets, and that was, at least those foam boxes were getting another life, old broccoli boxes and things. But that foam is really shocking, and it never really it breaks down, but it just still stays as small particles. And so now we use a thicker cardboard box with a recycled wool or a recyclable wool lining, and it's a byproduct of the wool industry at what would normally have just gone to landfill, and it gets packaged together. And so they've got a plastic sort of sleeve around them, but we use 2 of those inside a box, and with an ice mat as well. We did the tests, and they held up just as well as what we're doing with foam boxes. So they're quite a bit more expensive. So it was quite a big decision for us to make the transition. But we also transitioned our vacuum packing to biodegradable material as well, away from plastic. So they're big decisions in terms of our packaging bill has just skyrocketed, but we also feel that it's part and parcel of what we're, offering our customers. The next step would be all our delivery vans are charged off the roof of our factory. That's what we'd like to get to.
Yeah.
So that they're all solar, and then we store it overnight, and then trickle charge it overnight, and then they drive around. They're not quite there yet. They haven't quite got the range that we need. Our vans need to do 200 k's a day, but also with refrigeration. At the moment, it seems to me they've got around 200 k's, but not if it's running a refrigerated unit. So, but that won't be long. I think probably, we're talking 2 or 3 years. We'll be looking at a lot more electric-powered commercial delivery vehicles on the road. And if we can do that, it makes much more coherent message about what we're talking about in regard to production of food.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things butchers can take out of this. Like they don't have to change their whole business, but little things like solar powered and the packaging that you're using. I know there's a lot of butchers out there, making that change and using, whether they're using bamboo trays or biodegradable plastic bags. There's these little things that butchers can do just to make that little bit of difference, and don't be afraid to shout out about it too, because it's a big thing. The big majors, they're always.
Your customers want to know about it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk about the majors. The majors are only moved because of customer pressure. It was the same reason they, eventually agreed to phase out sort of, when they actually do it, caged eggs, for instance, or label them in that way. That was purely about customer demand. That wasn't about them saying, "Oh, we'd really like to do this on your behalf." So it's powerful. I think we were talking earlier that what's happened in the last 3 years with drought, bushfire, and COVID has really serve to focus people's mind about all the things that they rely on in their life, the supply chains that brings things to them, and how potentially brittle a lot of those supply chains are. I mean, we saw it just in the last few weeks. The supermarkets were empty with meat, and the butcher shops were well stocked. That's because our supply chains are much shorter and much more resilient than the supermarkets. In fact, so. It's interesting the sorts of lessons that have come out of this, I think, and probably there's not much left in the middle now. There's this sort of butcher shops that really want to cater to that level of demand, and then there's supermarkets. But I think the middle ground is probably what's disappeared. But I think there is room definitely for more butcher shops to be able to really talk to their consumer directly.
Yeah, definitely. The right direction is for butchers to make some of these changes, and to just remind the customers that they're out there and they've got access to the same type of food, but it's a lot fresher, it's a lot cleaner. They've got better control over what they're putting out on their shelves.
Yeah, that's right, and they know how long they've had it. There's a whole sort of series of things around that have made a huge difference, and I think the short supply chain is a really critical part of that. I think it's the long supply chain which has shown that, in an unstable world, long supply chains just don't work.
Yeah.
And or the delays in them are very unpredictable. And anyone trying to build anything at the moment will be very fully aware of just how difficult that is. There's no building materials around.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So. We butchers work with a product that has a direct relationship, and we should be emphasising that. It seems to me. Anyway.
Yeah. And mate, you and your partner Laura, you've written a book, The Ethical Omnivore.
Yeah, The Ethical Omnivore. Yes, it came out that was in the first COVID lockdown. I think it came out, so it was sort of August 20. It was really just really to put excuse the pun, a stake in the ground, to sort of say, well, this is what we've done over this period of time. These are the relationships we've formed with some, not all, but some of here's 5 or 6 of our producers that we think do really exceptional work, and why they do it. Like a pig farmer that finished up building his own abattoir on his farm and training himself as a meat inspector. And so they, those animals were born on that farm, lived in a sort of a relatively idyllic life in a paddock-based system, and then literally followed the 2 owners into their little, through the race into the lairage. Right. And there was an apple on the ground, and that was how they got the pig would say, oh, there's a nice apple, and that was the last thing it knew.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and then we had another supplier had a truck which went to his farm, picked them up, and delivered them straight to us. So, that was it's the model of something that can be very different, because I don't. This isn't a go at abattoirs, but it's the most uncontrolled part of what we do. We can work with a farmer very closely. In the case of beef, you might be looking at a 4-year production cycle from conception to when we get the carcass. A lot can go wrong in those few days between when it leaves the farm and when we get it. And, the tighter we can close that loop, the better we are, the better it is. And I think you're starting to see that. And the Food Authority isn't, they're starting to see that this can be done well, and these on-farm abattoirs can work very well. So, I think that's a big area that will develop over the next 10 years. I think you'll see a lot more on-farm killing for public consumption meat, not just for on-farm consumption.
Yeah, there's quite a few producers out there that have taken that up simply because they just couldn't, and they've got really good ethics. And I think a lot of their customers, like the butchers that use them, they really appreciate the extra work they're putting into making sure that their product can get from their property to the butcher shop with the least amount of handling and all done. Yeah, you're getting what we're telling you you're getting, or what they're telling you you're getting.
Well, you could move a carcass. it sort of doesn't matter whether the carcass travels in a truck for 12 hours, but it does matter if the live animal travels in a truck for 12 hours. So, there's a much more critical sort of issues at stake there.
Yeah.
And the meat chemistry, as we're increasingly sort of learning of the consequences of stress on meat quality, and it's obviously it's better for the animal, but it works the other end as well. It's better for what the butcher's going to work with, because the quality of that meat it'll hang much better. Its pH will be completely different, so you'll be able to age it properly. There's many benefits. One of our producers always gives his animals extra copramyl as a little bypass protein to load up their blood sugar before they go on a truck. So he knows that they're going to get stressed and use a bit of their blood sugar in that stress. He wants them to have enough in there so that they can go through rigor mortis properly when they finally get to the abattoir.
Yeah, right.
So by loading them up and peaking up their blood sugar, they always go through rigor mortis properly, and we get a really good pH on the final product of the meat we receive.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. It's the glycogen. Yeah, it's the energy they use up. Yeah.
That's it. And if they go with just an average amount, and then they have a particularly stressful journey, and then they're maybe held in the yards because there's a hold up at the abattoir, their glycogen levels are going to be very low when they hit the kill floor. And you want that glycogen to be as high as possible when they're in that stressful environment.
Yeah. And mate, also the educational classes you hold in the shop, they were pretty well received.
Yeah, we did. Well, we're about to start them. When are we? 2 weeks' time's the first one. We've done for ages. We used to do them every 2 weeks. Briefly started up. I think we did one and then stopped it again, obviously COVID related. There's a very big demand for it. We do introduction to whole animal butchery, which means that we sort of break down a whole animal in front of them, but then they work on a shoulder or a leg. And they take that away with them as well. So, they're 3 or 4 hour classes, and we don't mess around. We do, there's a lot to get through in that time. And then we have a barbecue at the end where we try, we'll cook things that are slightly different cuts that they mightn't have, be that familiar with. And being able to sort of locate it in the animal, know what function that muscle has in the animal, and then translate that to the way you cook it. I think that gives them we're trying to make them better cooks as well. And what it finishes up being largely is an anatomy lesson. And I think the thing that disarms them is that they become acutely aware how similar the muscular distribution is on their body to the one they're cutting up in front of them. I don't think most people realize that a pig is basically the same as them, with bigger ears, and especially a pig because of its digestive tract similarities, but all animals. And I think that sort of it sort of puts them in a different relationship. They think they're coming just to cut up meat. We're trying to sort of put them in a much more respectful relationship to that practice, because it's no small thing to kill things. I mean, we're engaged in selling the product of the death of animals, and for us, it's really important that's given a context that we respect this process and we respect the animal that gave its life to feed us. And when you lose that respect, I think it's time to get out of the gig.
Well, Grant, mate, thank you very much for your time tonight, mate. It's been very interesting. I've learned a few things.
You're welcome, Doug. And thank you for your interest.
No, always interesting. One thing I said the other day: you never stop learning. And that's one thing I like about my job. I've learnt so much since I've been here for 15 years now, and my knowledge on meats continues to grow, and listening to butchers to people like yourself and other people in industry.
Yeah, well, it is fascinating. That's what keeps us going too.
Yeah,
and obviously the feedback from the customers that interact with that. So. We all grow as a result of it. So it's the reward.
Yeah, job well done, mate. One final thing, Mr. Bone and Mrs. Feather.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's a very famous meat carter in Sydney called Spider. He used to deliver to us at our first place in Rozelle.
Right.
And Spider's, those of you, I think he's now got the Southern Sydney run, so I don't see him so often these days, but he does turn up in our book actually, because he was such a character, and he used to come 2 or 3 times a week, and he was the one who called Mrs. Feather and Mr. Bone, and it just stuck. And so it sort of made its way into the newsletter, and
interesting.
You can thank Spider for that.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Good
Best
on you,
meat
Spider.
carter in town.
Yeah.
Yes, well, we like the meat carters. I mean, we're rubbish without them, and they're as an important part in the process as anyone else. And it's like that chain, respecting the whole chain and all the different people that work in it. And meat carters are, if we want to work with carcass meat carters are absolutely crucial to keep our business going.
Definitely.
So here's to the meat carters.
Yeah, true. Cheers, boys. All right, mate, I'll let you get on with your evening. Thanks again, Grant, and we'll look forward to catching up with you over the next few months, and looking forward to coming out and having a look at the new shop.
Yeah, please do. Thanks, Doug.
Will do, mate. Cheers, mate. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Grant today and have a better understanding and view about sustainability and the importance of provenance in your business. Hopefully we've given you some answers to some of those curly questions about meat your customers ask, and some ideas about how you can add more value to some areas of your business. And lastly, get your orders in for the Greatest Butcher promo. As I said earlier, we do have extra promotional kits, so if you still want to get involved, make sure you drop me an email. I'm Doug Piper. I hope you found tonight's topic interesting. Thanks for tuning in and have a great week.
You've been listening to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, produced by The Sound Business.